right, I think we're ready to get started. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Randall Stevens. I'm with Avail. We're based in the US. I'm talking to you from Lexington, Kentucky. So if you haven't been to the US, probably have definitely not been to Kentucky. We're kind of on the East Coast, known for horses, thoroughbred horses, and bourbon. So that's our kind of claim to fame here in this region. But thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to, rather than bore you with slides, I'm going to spend some time and just kind of show you what you can do with Avail as a product. Before that, though, I just want to say thanks to A2K, the team there, Matt and Dexter, that's helping to put this on today. We've been partnered with A2K in Australia and New Zealand, probably for going on 3 years now. Soon after, actually, Avail became available in the market. So we've enjoyed the relationship, and thanks everybody for joining. Your all's morning, my evening. So just a little bit of the background story about how we got here and what problem we were trying to solve with Avail. This actually grew out of another company called ArchVision that's been in the AEC market for the better part of 3 decades, and part of that company's products, we were always building content management systems as part of the product delivery. And what we began learning was that with the customers that we had around the world in the AEC market, that there was a challenge, and a growing challenge over especially the last decade, with what it meant to, we use the word content management, to manage content. The reality is that most firms continue to use basically a file system as their way to manage most of the data, right, which is created and used to get their work done every day. So when you think about people in the AEC industry, their work product is typically creation of information. That information is usually created in different kinds of software, and those files that data is stored in are typically stored in a file system, whether that's on-prem, on a local machine, on a company network, or now more and more often in some cloud location, but they're all file systems. So we really set out, started this project back in 2015, 14-15 timeframe, working on what became Avail. And what we really learned or discovered was that the file systems themselves are just fine for storing this information, but as the amount of information content that we create has been growing exponentially, that the traditional file system interfaces, Windows file folders, file names, those types of things, are increasingly inadequate for being able to get back efficiently to all this information. We're just swimming in it, and it's just growing exponentially. And usually don't have to talk too long to somebody for them to nod their head and agree about the frustration of being able to navigate or find information in Windows file folders or in file systems that you may be interacting with. So we set out to start to work on that problem on your all's behalf. And a couple of key decisions that we made early on about the product that I think set us hopefully in the right direction. One was, we recognized that the customers in the AEC industry are using, it's not uncommon for a lot of our clients, enterprise kind of larger clients, to have between 100 and 200 different applications being used in the workflows. A lot of people obviously are using Revit and your main kind of piece of software, but you also might be using Rhino and 3ds Max for visualization, and it goes on, right, when you start putting the list together. And so it was important to us to look at this, solving the broader problem, which is all of these applications are producing information and data. So we wanted to be able to create a platform with Avail that was able to help the individuals that are getting their work done be able to access any of that information in these software interfaces. So the first critical decision we made was to be completely content agnostic. You can manage, as long as it's digital, you can manage it in Avail. And I'm going to give you some examples and show you some variety of the different kinds of things that you can do with it. We think that that's really important because in the long run, if every one of these applications has its own content management solution, it gets very frustrating for the end users because you're basically bouncing around between different systems. I think it's really why everybody's continued to default back to the traditional just Windows file folders, which can obviously be in common for all those applications and where to store the data. But as we can all probably attest, it's a not a very pleasant experience to find information when it's buried in folders. So so that was the first decision that we made that set us on this path. The other critical decision that we made was to be actually location of the content agnostic. So by that, we mean that we're not forcing our customers to move their data. They can actually leave their content and information wherever they've decided that it makes sense to store that. And that, as I said earlier, could be on-prem or more and more. We're starting to see this in cloud locations, be it in Autodesk Construction Cloud or Microsoft OneDrive. So we think that that was also an important decision to be made because I like to say that people choose where they need to store that information for lots of very good reasons, and it's kind of a futile effort to think that we should tell you to move that. There may be very important reasons why you've chosen to store info and data where you've chosen to store it. So Avail, actually, we index that information, and so rather than moving it, we're always pointing back to it, and that includes now lots of cloud locations and places that information can live. And I think really over this past year, as people were forced to change up their workflows because everybody, the networks changed. A lot of people obviously working from home now and getting to information. We've started seeing just lots of shifts in where information is, but it's not just information shifting from one location to another. It's greatly expanding with all the different cloud locations now that content is starting to live in, and we think that that's a trend that's going to continue. So it's important to think about what we're doing with Avail as simplifying that. I like to say that we're trying to take the where out of the equation. Users shouldn't have to know where a piece of content is, where the location of that is. They should just know that if they come to these interfaces that they can find it, have access to it, and they shouldn't really know or care if it was on-prem or in a cloud location or wherever that information resides. So those were, really two critical early decisions in the development of what we've done. And as I said, I think it's serving us well, and we're starting to see now that this complexity of where content is and the multiple places that it can live continues to grow. And as I said, I don't think that's going to stop. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to this is what you're seeing on your screen is what we call the Avail desktop app. You can think about this as really replacing Windows File Explorer as your primary way to get back to information. And then I'll take a deep dive and show you some very specialized things that we do around Revit and managing Revit content. But I'm going to kind of start out and just give you an overview of the application and show you some different things just to get you thinking about how this can be helpful in your own environments. So the first thing I always start with is minimized, just so that you can see that it is a desktop application that you install and that runs on the computer. I'm going to go full screen just so that you guys can see this. One of the things that we really spend a lot of attention on in the development of Avail is a recognition of how visual and the importance of visuals are to a lot of the content that we use in the AEC industry. So you'll hopefully see in everything that I'm going to show you as I walk you through this that there is a both attention to presenting the visual nature of all this content, but also minimizing the buttons and the clutter, right? Which is a very hard thing to do when you're developing software, because there's obviously a lot of demands and it's very easy to start throwing buttons everywhere. We've all seen it in a lot of poorly designed software that we all use on a daily basis. So we just put a lot of attention towards really trying to make it simple and easy to use. And that really plays well across our customer base, because ultimately, if it's not easy to use, you're not going to get uptake from your end users at their desk and get the real value out of this. So what you're seeing on the screen, this was actually, we did a major update to the platform last fall, and this is the 4th generation of the Avail desktop interface. And part of what we did on this last release was focus on an overhaul of the way the search technology actually works, and then part of it was this kind of new front end, kind of what we now call the home screen, and a display of these channels. So we use a metaphor of channels for organizing information and data that you may be looking for. The analogy I use for a channel is if you think of it like a music playlist, it acts very similar to that. You basically create the playlist and you decide what content should live in that playlist, and that's how you can go and access it. So as you can see here, and it's completely up to you to design your use of Avail around your own content, your own practices. So literally, when you first install Avail, it's a blank slate. You just basically create channels, give those channels names, decide what's the best visual, what we call channel card, to represent that, and then you index content in it. So I'm just going to show you, first of all, the kind of variety of content. I'll start out with just some Revit content here, so you can see this is a channel that's full of standard Revit standards library. And if I look down at the bottom left, there's almost 3,500 pieces of content. The first thing I'll show you is if I select one of these and right click and say open the location, it's probably going to pop on my other screen over here. What you'll see is that it just opened up Windows File Explorer and took me to where that piece of content is. And you can see, right, that this lives on the network down right in this folder hierarchy that I call it file folder hell, that we all live in, trying to find this kind of information. So the first thing is, Avail kind of, we would use the term flatten. It kind of flattens out the availability of this. But you'll also notice down here at the bottom what we call the filters panel, that you can open this filters panel, and Avail automatically has picked up a lot of metadata and information and displaying them in the form of what we call tags around this. So searching, you'll notice there's a search bar across the top, which makes it very easy to just type in what you're looking for. You can also use these tags and in any combination of that. And you'll notice that this data is actually structured data. So you'll get things like Revit category, and I can see all the different Revit categories. So if I choose casework, what you're going to see is that Avail is searching and filtering down by just showing me things that have been tagged with the word casework. I think it's important, almost everything that I'm going to show you in this demo was the information, the tags were automatically either picked up from the files themselves or from the file system. So there's very little manual work that has to go on in being able to get this level of information. And I'm just holding down my control key and using my scroll wheel to change the scale of this, of those thumbnails, just to kind of show you. If I go over here to the right and open up what we call the preview panel, you'll see that you're able to get nice high resolution previews of things like this as well. But I can also, I'm not limited when I'm talking about Revit content to things like families. We also support data that has to be stored in RVT files. So things like drafting views and other content that you may be tasked with using and organizing and using in your projects. And as you can see here, again, the ability to display high resolution, high enough res that you can actually see if it's the detail that you're wanting to use before you've committed to bringing it into your project. So this is just one example of our heavy focus on the visual nature of all this, and making sure that when this content gets into the system into Avail, that you can see it, and it's very helpful in finding what you're looking for. Before I take a deeper dive and show you some of the specialized things that we do with Revit, let me just show you a little more breadth of the kinds of content that you can organize in here. So if I were to, I've got some channels here for some other kind of application specific. I tend to use SketchUp as a simple example. You can see I've got a channel here that's got a couple of thousand pieces of Revit content. Again, this is all searchable with a simple text search, or using my filters to filter that down. What I'm going to do is actually, though, just bring up the SketchUp application and show you that getting content from Avail into an application is often just as easy as finding it, dragging, and dropping it. So the reason that, when I said that Avail is content agnostic, the reason that this works is that is a file type, SKP file extension, that the host application, SketchUp in this case, knows what to do with. So if I were to go back out to the home screen and look for like my textures channel, I can find a channel full of textures, which are probably JPEGs and PNG files, and maybe go look for a masonry texture, and this quickly kind of narrow down this content. And if I wanted to bring that brick texture into SketchUp, you can see that as I drag that over, that's not because Avail had to do anything special. That's just because SketchUp knows what to do with these file types. So the general test is, if you can drag and drop it into the application from Windows File Explorer, you can also drag and drop it from Avail, which makes it very flexible. I could just as easily have photographs in here and be dragging those into PowerPoint or Microsoft Word document just as easy as I can these technical applications. So I usually like to just kind of start with that to get you just thinking more broadly about the variety of content that can be managed inside of this application. If I go back out to the home screen, what I'll show you is that you can also you can do perform your searches from this home screen, and it's actually going to search across all of this content. So for instance, if I were to search for casework, and rather than being in that single channel and looking at that information, I can actually look across all of my information and content and get results back. What you'll notice in the Avail interface across the top is we also, maybe more importantly than bringing back the content, which can be kind of noisy, you can get a lot of, depending on what you're searching for, you could find a lot of content like this, but we bring back the context that we found that in. So in this case, I can actually just scroll across here and see the different channels where I found this information. So if I knew I was looking for, Revit 2020 casework, I can filter that with one click, or I may find out that there's, information in one of these other channels. Like here's some URLs. So here's a great example of the flexibility of what all that you can index and view. This is actually a URL to a manufacturer's website that's been organized in Avail. If I open up that preview panel and touch that link to the URL, what you're going to see is that Avail is actually rendering right inside the application that website. So that makes it very, again, very flexible. We've got a lot of customers. I've got a couple of channels here with just lots of URLs that I can show you, but we've got a lot of customers who have started, in fact, this feature was, we learned from watching what our customers were doing with Avail and added this feature in, but they were starting to organize, especially interiors groups or people that have a lot of external references to info. You can see that you can actually tag these things now, and filter these down and then open up that preview panel and go, direct links. And that can be not only an external website, could be an intranet site, or just anywhere that you've got information being stored. And if I were to double click on this, it's just going to open up. It's going to open up on my other screen over here, but it's just going to, launch my web browser. Here, I'll just show you. It's just going to launch my Chrome and took me to that website if I double clicked on it. So, but we have built in these built-in preview and viewing capabilities. Another document type that's very useful in are PDF documents. So here you can see lots of PDF documents. I've got them in a lot of different channels of information. And if I were to select one of these and open up the preview panel, what you'll see is that you can actually preview that and quickly see if that's indeed the document that you need. So I like to use the example of, we're not, if you're using Bluebeam as your primary PDF software, we're not trying to replace what Bluebeam does. What we're trying to do is help you see if this is the information that you need to get to before you launch that into Bluebeam. And if I had Bluebeam installed here, if I just double clicked on that PDF, it would launch right into that. So very flexible from that standpoint. Again, manufacturer's info and data just makes it very quick and easy to be able to see if this is what you're looking for and be able to pull information out, or decide, as I said, to open it up in another application. So that's showing you just some of the breadth. Visualization assets are probably, outside of Revit, kind of in DWG, AutoCAD files, visualization assets are probably the number 2 use case. You can see here I have like 3ds Max files that are being managed in a channel. So again, the ability to search, get back, find that information. The other use case that's become quite popular is the ability to organize and manage photos. Doesn't even have to just be marketing photos. It could be your construction photos or site photos that are project related. And again, the ability to get those into this interface. The preview panel, again, comes in very handy to be able to see those in high enough res. We also introduced in this last release what we call a carousel viewer. So if I close that, I can actually go into a carousel viewer, and this lets me mouse over, and I can thumb through, page through photos. So a lot of, again, focus on the visuals. And I saw that some questions are starting to come in. I didn't say that up front, but feel free to put those questions in, and we should have plenty of time here when I finish to start answering some of those questions. Let me kind of go ahead and take a little bit deeper dive into Revit. What I'm going to do is actually just dock the Avail desktop. Typically, our customers would have 2 monitors, obviously, sitting on their desk when they're using software like this. I'm going to put these side by side just so that you can understand the interaction and the pieces of software that we have and how they interact. So I've just opened up Revit and obviously the sample project file here. What you're seeing though here is that we have what we call the Avail Browser, which is a plug-in browser for Revit. And let me get this. And what this browser lets us do is, in the context of your Revit project, be able to see and pull information. I'm going to narrow this down just a little bit to give me more room. Lets us bring in a very specialized Revit content. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. I'm just going to go to a 3D view to start here. So here I am in my desktop, and I'm going to show you. You actually can work without the desktop open. You can actually just work directly inside the browser if you want. But I'll just use this as a kind of example to start showing you how this can work. But what I'm going to do is, let's just go up here and search for that casework again, see our casework samples. So I'll start with just some simple families and just show you how the interaction. So if I choose that family here in the desktop, what you're going to see in the session of the active Revit project session is the Avail browser then is going to bring forward all of this kind of secondary information, in this case, all of the types that are available for that. And I can either select a single type and load it into my project. We actually support multi-select, so I could load multiple types into the project. Or more often than not, your workflow can be to just drag and drop that over into the model, and it's going to bring that single type in and put me into placement mode. So you'll notice that there's a little check mark beside that single type that loaded. And if I go over here to the project browser and go down to the families where that piece of casework lives, what you're going to see is that single type came in. So one of the things that we've seen with our customers, especially in the context of using this for their Revit projects, is customers are always fighting data bloat inside of their projects. So one of the and traditionally the mode of operation has been to try to stuff everything that you might need for a project into a template and start the project up. But what we've been seeing over the last few years is a move towards trying to thin those templates out, usually to just the graphic standards, and then using Avail to keep all of the information outside of the project until it specifically is needed. So you can think about that as a very additive process to your project, as opposed to trying to bring in lots of data that you then are fighting. And we see it all the time, that as the project grows and the amount of data in it, you're fighting that project data bloat. So it's actually kind of antithetical to think that I want to bulk load lots of this information into the project if I can just selectively bring it in as it's needed, and then that way you're keeping your project the data that's actually in your Revit project file thinned out. So that's obviously a simple example. If I did want to load just a couple of other types in, I could just click with one button click, select those, and they're going to get loaded into the project without putting me in placement mode. Just a very quick workflow of finding and getting that information into your project. What gets most people excited are things that aren't families, and I'm going to show you the kind of traditional support for this, and then I'm going to show you a brand new feature that we actually just introduced last week. But here you can see I've got RVT files. So there's a lot of your Revit information that aren't families. So things like drafting views, system families, views, sheets, schedules, all of that kind of information ultimately has to be stored in an RVT file. And there's complexity to that. But what I'm going to show you is that here you can see that I have these details in a library that are all searchable. But if I select one of those, what you're going to see in the Avail browser is that Avail, this is an external RVT. So without opening that project, we're behind the scenes actually exposing that information. You can see here that I get the preview, but I can also right click and do a full vector-based preview. So there you can see that once I'm in the context of Revit, I can do that. I still have not brought this data into the active Revit project. So what I'm going to do is just go over here and create a sheet. Let's just create a new sheet to work on. And now I can actually just drag and drop, if I want to, that drafting view directly onto a sheet. So this is basically replacing a multi-step process that everybody's used over the years, which is a Revit project standards transfer from project A to project B. We've just really simplified these interfaces, so you can see it loads it and puts me into placement mode all in one step. And again, just to focus on the visuals of being able to do this. Let me go back to my 3D view and just show you very quickly the other kinds of content types that you're forced to have to manage this way are things like system families, which again have to be stored in an RVT file. So what you're going to see here is I have some system families here. in a single, we call these container libraries, like a single RVT file. So what you're going to see is that Avail is opening that data up. You can see here that I have all of these system families. They're actually searchable in here. So if I knew that there was like a veneer, well, let's find maybe brick. I'm looking for a wall type, find the wall type, and again, I can just drag and drop and start modeling instantly with that out of this interface. So this has been the default kind of support that we've had for how to manage this, and obviously has been a huge help to all of our customers who were fighting, how to store this information and make it findable and usable by their end users. What I'm going to show you is actually a brand new feature. I'm going to go out to a different channel. We released a new feature we call Harvest. And so I'm going to go to a different channel here that's just got some drafting views in it. What we've done, let me just go full screen with the desktop for a second. So these are all details that are actually, all of these details are being stored in a single RVT container file behind the scenes. So what it allows you to do though is it completely frees up in the interface that these are taggable, searchable, findable. If I open up my preview panel, you'll see that we get high resolution. All this was automatically generated by our Harvest tool, pre-processing on all of these files. But this makes all of this, searchable, findable, and then ultimately in the context, well, let me close my preview panel there. In the context of Revit, that's now, immediately available to be brought into my project. So if I go back to that sheet that I had created and now open the browser, you'll see that I can actually drag and drop this directly onto a sheet in this project. Come back here. Oh, I think I was in placement mode. Well, let me get that loaded. So this is, there we go. Oh, I think I'd loaded the same object. That was my problem. Let's get a different, there we go. I was trying to load the same detail. So it makes it that easy. What I'm going to show you is that this has actually even simplified this further. If I close my browser, even inside of Revit, I can actually just drag and drop these directly from the desktop application over into Revit directly onto a sheet. So we think that this is going to, really simplify what it means for the end users. Not only for the BIM managers and the people that are responsible for managing the content, because you can manage all this in a single container file, but it's really helpful for the end users because it kind of makes it very easy to search, and they don't have that complexity of having to worry about, is that inside of an RVT file or is it a family file? Can I drag and drop it? What are the steps to be able to get this into the project? So if you think, kind of take a step back from our philosophy of what we've been trying to do, this is another example of taking location out of the equation. The end user shouldn't have to worry where that content is. They should just be worried about, can I find it in the library? Do I have access to it? And if I do, can I get it into the project? So let me just show you real quickly that this will work standalone, and then I'll open this up for some questions and see if we can answer any questions for you. But watch what happens if I close this desktop application. The Avail, I'll go full screen now inside of Revit, but this browser now goes into what we call standalone mode. So I have the ability to still see all of those channels that I had access to information in. This is all still searchable. So if I knew that, let's see what I've got in here. I'll just look for, copier. So there's copiers that I have access to. And again, if I'm in my project and working, I can just drag and drop this, directly into my model. And you'll also see that it's going to display if there's any types available for me to to be able to choose from. So let's see. I see that some questions while I'm doing that. Let's see what questions have come in. And yeah, feel free to type in if you've got a question. Looks like the first question was, is it possible to negate the filter tag, say if you want to find miscellaneous content by excluding the content that is tagged? That's a good question. We're asked that actually quite often. Not currently. It makes for a complicated UI experience, user experience. There probably are some ways that we could do it so that it wouldn't be confusing, but the real challenge becomes, Boolean searches, the mathematics and the way that you do Boolean searches, this, and that, or this or that, get very complicated. They're so complicated that even for very bright people, they get confused when you finally put it in front of them. So it's one of the reasons that we've kind of stuck to this what we call a narrowing search strategy, which is start your journey of what you're looking for, and then we're just going to keep narrowing and asking you more questions or providing you more data to continue narrowing that out, as opposed to trying to do complicated Boolean operations. That being said, I think that there probably are some ways, it may be just for the managers to use, or more sophisticated users to be able to do inversions of the selection sets and those types of things. But that's something that we'll continue to look at. Good question though, Warren. Any other questions? And we're happy to open that up. If somebody wanted to turn their audio on, we can unmute you as well. Yes, so Warren asked another question about whether it was whether you can add tags. Just that actually brings up just a couple of other points. Yes, the answer is you can always manually add tags. We have for Revit, we have what we call the Revit tag generator. So actually most all that information that you saw in the context of Revit most of that was parameter data coming out of the Revit files themselves and auto-populating. We also pick up metadata off of the file system. So folders and folder names get brought in as information. And then as soon as I get the desktop open back here, I'll show you, you can also manually add tags, so you can add more information. We actually have a new feature that we're in testing with right now that's going to be released here in the coming weeks. And that is that we have the ability to import and export from Excel and Google Sheets. So you can take large libraries of this information, spit it out into an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, do some tag management, and then shove it right back into the system. So just lots of flexibility on that front. Let me just go full screen here and show you. So if I went into one of these channels and I wanted to manually add a piece or manually add a tag, I'll just select it. I can right click and say I'm going to add a tag, and I'm just going to add my name to that. And it's that easy. You save the changes, and as soon as that's finished, if I type in Randall, it's now going to be searchable by that. You can see I've demoed with that on several pieces. So yes, you can manually add tags. And then, yeah, let me just, the next question was, can we drag and drop schedules? And the answer is yes. Let me actually, I kind of stopped on the, how cool this new harvest is, but it is pretty exciting to see that you can do this with schedules. And so I'm going to go back to my Revit project, and let me open up that sheet again. So I'm going to go back. I've got some content that I've put into that I used Harvest, and you'll see here that I've got system families, but I've also got drafting views, legends, schedules. So here are a bunch of schedules. So if I were looking for, say, a door schedule, I can search for the door schedule, and I'm going to, again, I can drag and drop this directly onto this project, directly onto a sheet from my library. So I'm just going to drag this over here. What Avail's going to do is bring in that schedule, load it, it's being populated obviously with this project's information, and that easily. So what we have a lot of customers beginning to do, not only kind of say an overall firm-wide library, say of Revit content, but they'll actually start to get down to either project types and use channels to organize data for specific project types, or even all the way down to a specific client. If you've got a specific client that has certain requirements or standards that they want their information built in, you can think about organizing that in a channel of Avail and using that then for that project specifically to be able to get your work done. So schedules, legends can be brought over. So basically, any of this data that you can think of that you could do with a Revit project standards transfer. So we're trying to support. There's still a couple of things. The view templates that you ask about, that's one that we aren't currently supporting, but we're working on it. So we're going to add that hopefully here shortly. And the other, while that's loading, the other thing that you can do inside of Avail is you can actually have your users flag content. So I actually, just by clicking on it, I can say that a piece of content needs attention. And if it needs attention, we basically pop up a box and say, what's wrong with it? So it's a great, we refer to it as break fix kind of workflow. Somebody sees that there's something wrong with something and they can flag it, and it brings it to your attention, right, as a manager of the library or BIM managers across the projects. So and it won't let me add that flag without telling that what's wrong, so I could do that, add a flag to it, and it gets flagged. That's actually a good little segue while maybe some more questions are being queued up. I'm going to show you, there's actually a lot of data and analytics that are behind all this. So these are some standard dashboards that we give our customers. There's a lot of data, analytics data that's flowing behind the scenes. You actually have complete control of all the raw data, our customers do, and we provide some kind of standard interfaces like this to be able to see that. But you can see, not only users, this is just my demo account, so you can see usage information, but you can also see things like the flags and comments that might be coming through, what the trends are, when over time those things are happening, what content's being flagged. You can drill into search information, so you can see what people are actually searching for. If you looked over here in the bottom right, this is actually one of the most, I think, most useful pieces of information once you start implementing a system like this, is what are people searching for that they can't find? What's returning 0 results when they search for it? And these become great, I call it a content roadmap. It actually starts to tell you what you need to go work on next, as far as your what's important that your users, your customers are having trouble finding. And then in relation to projects, you can actually see, this one's actually easier to read from right to left, but it's basically who put what content out of what channel into what project. So you can actually see kind of this flow of information, and this is all filterable. So if I wanted to see, where this door jamb detail, how many times it was used, which projects it was brought into, so you can see all this kind of information. And you can see all this over time, so you can actually look at this over time frames. So that's all very helpful, and probably the first time that most people have had access to know what people were looking for, which is a very valuable thing without guessing. Next question was, if you update content, are you notified? If you drop a newer RFA, for example, will it say, do you want to overwrite? The answer is yes. If you're bringing in a piece of content and that already exists in your project, Revit will kick in and ask you, what do you want to do? Do you want to overwrite this or bring it in? So we're not doing anything to kind of override what Revit would automatically try to check for. Another question Tim had was, can you subscribe to a flag? Can a BIM manager get notified? Yes and no. So it's going to show up in your analytics, and actually the analytics, you can you can basically have the analytics send you emails. The problem with the way that that system works is, or the limitation is that it'll usually only give you a digest. So like once a day is the frequency. It won't like send it to you immediately. We've actually tried to avoid, I'll call it, a whole lot of noise coming out of Avail. In other words, if there was lots of messaging coming all the time, you just, if you're like me, you just start ignoring it. So we are working on some new notification capabilities. So you would be able to do things like, you know, if something gets flagged, notify me immediately, or give me a digest once a day or once a week. So the analytics actually already does some of that. So you can ask it for a weekly digest or a daily digest and some of those things. We're going to be working on some new notification capabilities that are going to get more granular than that, so that we could send those out. If what I didn't show you is that every time you create a channel, by default, you are the only person. The person that creates it is the only person that sees that channel. So if I were to go into this Revit channel and I'm the owner of it, or I have what we call publishing editing rights to this, I can go to shared users. So you can see that this channel has been shared. This one has been shared with everyone in the company, basically what we call everyone in your plan. And you can decide whether they have editing privileges or not to this. So you can, there's a couple of roles. By default, people are what we call consumers, and then people can become publishers, which means they can create these channels and curate that. And then every time somebody creates a channel, they own it, and they have to decide who else they want to elevate privileges to be able to also work on that channel. So quite a bit of flexibility with, you know, kind of from a command and control standpoint about what you're able to do on that front. And then the last question that I see here was managing versions. Is it on the same thumbnail, or like you showed, have different channels? You can do this in multiple ways. You can either break the content up if you wanted to process it, you know, which a lot of customers do. They'll take, you know, right now 2022 is getting ready to come out. They'll take their 2021 library, do a bulk upgrade of it, you know, copy the content over, do a bulk upgrade, and then you can just push that into Avail and have it available. Avail will also let you upgrade on the fly. So here I am in in Revit 2020. If I went into and had a piece of content that was in 2019, I'll just give you a quick example and show you what it does. You know, when I touch that piece of content, it's just going to ask me if I want to do an on-the-fly upgrade. So that quickly, it'll upgrade that piece of content on the fly and let you bring it in. So, and we could do that automatically. Because sometimes things are stored in RVT files, and the RVT files could be large, we tend to not make that an automated thing and let the user just decide if they want to, you know, perform the upgrade. And it's usually, like I just showed there, a couple of seconds. We do also have a host in cloud feature. So I'm going to show you another channel here where I have content that's now hosted in the cloud. So you can decide if you want to publish information into a cloud hosted location. And what you'll see here then is, if I were, say, looking for door, and let me filter down to doors, you'll notice that there's a little, actually, it looks like all those have been downloaded. Let me find one that hasn't been downloaded. Go to my casework. So you can see the little download icon that shows up, and all I have to do is click to download and watch what happens in the browser. So as soon as that's downloaded, it's immediately available to be brought into the project. And what you're not seeing behind the scenes, we handle the type catalog files automatically, all that kind of information. So, all right. Good questions, Tim. Thanks. Thanks for throwing those out. Looks like I missed a couple earlier. Do materials all map automatically? So the answer is yes, because we're not moving the files around. Unless you're doing hosting cloud, now you're actually moving the file around, but otherwise the content's staying wherever it was that you have it stored. So the mappings all stay aligned, which is a big problem. I'm glad you asked that question, Mark. There's some other strategies that we're actually working on for how to help with the hosting cloud problem, or cloud hosting of content in general, because it does, for any application that has specific map paths, if the applications want to store that and you have very explicit places that those maps need to be to look for them, that presents a challenge. So we're working on some new strategies to actually help along that front. And can we see samples in realistic? I assume you mean realistic mode. Not in Avail. So we're not doing any rendering per se in the Avail software, but of course in Revit I could go into realistic mode. Not sure if that's what you were asking, Mark, or not, but. All right, Tim, another question. And view templates, color schemes. Yeah, we haven't added the support for the view templates yet, but that's with our new harvest capability, but that's one that we're working on. So that, and nobody's asked about materials, which is always a question. We're going to try to tackle both the view templates and materials in next. Great. And yeah, if anybody was interested in, I can also unmute if anybody wants to raise their hand or ask a question live while you've got me. There you go, Tim. All right, I think you're on,
yeah.
Tim.
Hey, Randall, how are you, mate?
I'm good.
This might not be the right forum, but I was just curious about your pricing structure as well. Is that something we talked to A2K about, or is it similar?
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you should.
User, or
It's a. I'll give you the general. It's a user-based licensing. So one of the nice things that I think that we do and we get complimented on a lot is actually we measure average number of users. So once you've deployed more than 50 users, you can be in what we call an enterprise plan, which means we're not going to limit how many machines you can put this on. And then on an annual basis, we just look at how many average monthly users you had, and that's what sets your base, what we call baseline number of users. But yeah, the A2K team can help you. You know, specifically with what that would look like, but it is a user-based model.
Thanks.
And we're doing. I'll use that to kind of. I'm a little bit dangerous. I'm on the product side, so I'm always working on the next gen of things. And one of the things that we're excitedly working on right now is actually a mobile strategy. So being able to see all of this kind of information on mobile devices, we think is going to be exciting new opportunities. So it fits very well with our kind of usage model that, hey, we want to, once you begin to get your information organized and managed in here, our goal is to make it accessible wherever you are, whenever you need to see it. So we're hard at work on that right now. So thanks for that question though, Tim.